Hormones and endometriosis. It's a topic that's surrounded by confusion, half-truths, and oversimplified advice. For decades, the standard approach to endometriosis was to switch off the hormones that fuel the disease. Patients were told to stop ovulating, to stop menstruating, even to stop producing estrogen altogether. But over time, we've realized that this approach, while it may reduce pain temporarily, doesn't actually treat the disease. It simply suppresses the symptoms. Hi, I'm Dr. Abhishek Mangeshikar, robotic excision surgeon and endometriosis specialist. In this video, I want to explain what hormone therapy can and cannot do in endometriosis, when it's appropriate, what the risks are, and how certain newer options like Tibolone can be safely used in specific contexts such as after hysterectomy or surgical menopause. Endometriosis is what we call an estrogen-dependent disease. This means that the lesions outside the uterus, the endometriosis-like tissue that shouldn't be there, grow and react to estrogen in the same way similar to the uterine lining. So when estrogen levels rise during the menstrual cycle, these lesions can swell, bleed, and trigger inflammation and pain. This is why the earliest treatment attempts focused on reducing estrogen to quiet down the disease. However, estrogen is not a villain. It's a vital hormone for bone density, cardiovascular health, brain function, and mood. Completely shutting it down for years, as was once common practice, has serious long-term consequences, including osteoporosis, fatigue, depression, and reduced fertility. So the goal today is not to eliminate estrogen, but to balance it. We aim to manage its influence in a way that reduces symptoms while minimizing side effects and long-term harm. There are several categories of hormonal therapy used in endometriosis, and each works slightly differently. The most commonly prescribed are combined oral contraceptive pills, which contain both estrogen and progestin. These pills suppress ovulation and make the endometriosis tissues less responsive, reducing monthly flare-ups. For many patients, they can be a reasonable first-line option for temporary pain control. Then, we have progestin-only options such as Dinogest or norethindrone acetate. These thin out the endometrium and reduce bleeding, but they can also cause irregular spotting, bloating, or mood changes in some people. More aggressive options include GnRH analogs and antagonists like leuprolide or elagolix. These drugs induce an artificial menopause by shutting down the brain's hormonal signals to the ovaries, drastically lowering estrogen. The downside is that they also accelerate bone loss and cause menopausal side effects, hot flashes, mood changes, and even long-term cardiac risks if used excessively. That's why we sometimes use add-back therapy, small doses of estrogen and progesterone, to protect the bones and reduce those side effects while maintaining suppression. However, these are all temporary measures. They do not treat the disease. They do not remove the disease. Once you stop them, symptoms usually return because the underlying lesions are still there. Here's the important truth. Hormonal therapy cannot excise endometriosis. It cannot reverse fibrosis or adhesions. It doesn't restore normal anatomy or free trapped organs. What it can do is make the symptoms feel better by reducing inflammation and suppressing bleeding. So for mild cases or for those awaiting surgery, hormonal suppression can be a bridge, but it's not a cure. The problem arises when suppression becomes indefinite, when women are told to just stay on the pill for years, even as their disease progresses underneath. This delays diagnosis, worsens fibrosis, often making eventual surgery much more complex. So, while hormones are a useful tool, they must be used with clear intent, not as a lifelong cover-up. After excision surgery, the focus changes. The goal is no longer to suppress disease, but to support healing, maintain hormonal balance, and prevent recurrence. In women who've had a hysterectomy with or without oophorectomy, meaning the uterus and possibly ovaries removed, the conversation about hormone replacement becomes very specific. We need to maintain bone health and cardiovascular protection, but at the same time, we don't want to re-stimulate any residual endometriosis tissue. This is where Tibolone plays a unique role. It is a synthetic steroid with estrogenic, progestogenic, and mild androgenic properties. It acts like a hormone replacement, but with a twist. It doesn't cause cyclical fluctuations. It provides the benefits of estrogen for bone and mood and cardiac health, while minimizing the risk of stimulating dormant endometriosis implants. That's why I often describe it as a balanced option for women who are post-hysterectomy or surgical menopause. It's not suitable for everyone, but in the right patient, it helps maintain strength, energy, and hormonal stability without the flare-ups that can happen with traditional estrogen therapy. The idea that less period equals less disease is tempting but oversimplified. Long-term suppression, especially with combined oral contraceptives or GnRH analogs, comes with trade-offs. Prolonged hypoestrogenism, which is a low estrogen state, can lead to bone density loss, cardiovascular risk, vaginal atrophy, and even long-term metabolic changes. There's also the mental health impact. Mood swings, fatigue, and loss of libido are common but often under-discussed. For younger patients, prolonged suppression can also mask ovarian reserve decline, making it harder to evaluate fertility later. That's why we individualize therapy carefully, balancing symptom control with long-term well-being. The most important thing is to remember that hormonal therapy isn't an all or nothing decision. It's about timing, it's about tailoring. If someone is too young for surgery or not ready, hormonal suppression can offer relief and prevent progression for a while. If someone has had complete excision, short-term suppression may help stabilize the hormonal environment during healing. The key is always informed choice. Patients must understand what the therapy is doing, how long it should be continued, and what side effects to watch for. Too often, hormone therapy is prescribed without that conversation, and that's where distrust builds. We need to shift from automatic prescribing to strategic prescribing. The future is moving towards selective hormone modulation, drugs that can block estrogen's inflammatory effects without eliminating its protective benefits. New agents targeting estrogen receptor subtypes, selective progesterone receptor modulators, and even non-hormonal anti-inflammatory molecules are under development. The goal is smarter, more precise therapy with fewer side effects. Eventually, we'll move away from switching off the ovaries and towards modulating the body's response, combining molecular medicine with surgical precision and holistic recovery. That's the direction this field is heading, and it's long overdue. Hormone therapy has a role in endometriosis, but it's a supporting role, not the main act. It can buy time, reduce symptoms, and help stabilize hormones after surgery or menopause. But it's not a cure, and it should never be a substitute for treating the actual disease. In some situations, especially after hysterectomy or surgical menopause, balanced therapies like Tibolone can offer safe, sustained relief. The key is individualization, knowing when to use hormones, why, and for how long. If this video helped clarify the role of hormone therapy in endometriosis, share it with someone who's been confused or anxious about their options. And if you'd like to learn more about surgery, hormones, and recovery altogether, like, share, and subscribe. The more informed we are, the safer and more effective our decisions become.